So I'll show you that. In order to pivot trade to the EU, says Mark Carney, we have to have an industrial carbon tax, but that's bunk. There are a whole bunch of EU countries, including big EU countries, Germany, Spain, Greece, that don't have carbon tax and others. And so this is not something that is, again, Mark Carney has found lying, and that's interesting to watch. The Coutts charges, or some more Coutts charges, are removed. So there's a guy who was doing sidewalk chalk, and he was charged with stuff, but they would withdrawn those charges, and that's interesting to watch. Mark Carney gets testy in front of reporters, and he's only just started. Like this is his first time out. He's in Europe. People are asking him questions about conflict of interest and rules and all of that, and he gets very, very medium upset. And he says, "Listen, I'm obeying all the rules," and it makes me think of Hillary Clinton. And I tried to find the clip, but I could only find it in song. So we've got a bit of a musical episode this morning, and so I think Mark Carney is Canada's Hillary Clinton. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. Andy Lee says Parliament is prorogued. Canadians are suffering, and we are funding a lavish overseas WEF reunion tour for an unelected prime minister that won't discuss his conflict and sneers at journalists. What are we even doing? Do people not see how absolutely insane this is? I guess not. Laurie says, Bloomberg, Mark Carney held $6.8 million of Brookfield Asset Management Limited, so he held a lot of his own company, options before quitting for his political run, but the investment manager's annual 10K filing offers little information about how much it paid the man who's now Canada's prime minister. So the reporters are trying to find information about Mark Carney and any kind of payment, et cetera, that he had, but they're not coming up with much. It all seems to be under wraps, and that's interesting. Eva Chipik is responding to Tamara Lich, and they're all asking my question: why is Parliament still prorogued? Why are you on a European tour? What is going on at this point in time? And Eva says, excellent question. What are they doing? What is their mandate? And why are we paying for it? And yeah, very interesting. Ron, I think, said that he's going to bend the knee to King Charles. And I think that is accurate. Like there's a picture of him here with King Charles, right? So this is, yes, Mark Carney is bending the knee to King Charles, right? This is part and parcel of what politicians do, but it doesn't usually have to happen like immediately after being appointed, right? Like, honestly, I don't think this has ever, maybe this has happened before, unelected prime ministers, etc. Did John Turner fly immediately over to bend the knee to the Queen then? I don't think so, right? Did the Queen come here to make sure? I don't remember, but it seems odd, right? It seems odd in crisis. The biggest crisis in 100 years, Mark Carney flies over to Europe to hang out with France and England. Weird, very strange. CBC Watcher is responding to this article: Carney remains mum on value of his assets and blind trust. And here's the quote: Mr. Carney appeared annoyed when reporters reminded the former central banker and corporate executive. I just want you to notice the framing of who Mark Carney is in the press. Okay, they're framing him as a former central banker, which is basically calling somebody a robber baron, and a corporate executive. This is positioning him as different than you, right? Like, you're not a central banker, you're not a corporate exec. And so it's interesting that they're framing him the way they are. I don't think they're trying to frame him in a positive light. It doesn't seem like that with that kind of language. Anyway, the Canadians would not know what potential conflicts of interest exist until after the coming election. Mr. Carney is expected this week to trigger a federal election for either April 28th or May 5th. But I've heard that before, and they were saying it was going to be maybe April 5th or something like that. Originally, they were saying it was going to be called last week, right? And so all these people the rumor mill is going with election rumors, but who knows? Here is a whole bunch of people responding to Mark Carney and this clip. I'll show you the first minute or so. Table Salt says he lied about voting to move Brookfield to the United States. He lied about resigning from all his board seats. He lied about immediately repealing the carbon tax. What are your assets? Trust me, bro, they're fine, says Mark Carney. So his pattern is to do one thing. Why should we trust him? Michelle Rempel-Garner says, listen to the utter contempt and disdain with which Carney treats Stephanie Levitz when she asks about his potential conflict of interest. If he treats her question this way, a veteran member of the legacy media, think about he'll treat you. Brutal, share widely. So, I mean, does a veteran member of the legacy media deserve special status of some kind? We're talking Here's Mark Carney talking to Stephanie Levitz and Rosemary Barton. He says to Rosemary Barton, "Look inside yourself, Rosemary." And I can't believe it. I mean, it's kind of funny, but what are you saying? Like, what? Here's Mark Carney.
Madam.
Mr. Carney, Stephanie Levitz, the Globe and Mail. We understand that you have now placed your assets in a blind trust, so you don't know what's happening to them going forward, but you knew what they were going into that blind trust. So what are they?
Look, Stephanie, I follow the rules of the Ethics Commissioner. I'm following them well in advance of any of the requirements, as you know, because I know you know this. You know that these requirements come into effect in months. We're talking days after I became Prime Minister. So I'm complying with the rules of the Ethics Commissioner, going through the processes and all these things that are necessary.
The rules say that those assets should be publicly disclosed within 120 days, which means you'll campaign in a coming federal election, most likely within the next 120 days, and are serving as Prime Minister now, with Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you sought to avoid.
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point final.
Are you saying you are not open to any conflict of interest?
Yes.
Trump spent most of his life in the private sector. There's no possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and ill will. I have served in the private sector. I have stood up for Canada. I have left my roles in the private sector at a time of crisis for our country. I'm complying with all the rules. Your line of questioning is trying to invent new rules. I'm complying with the rules that Parliament has laid out and the responsibilities of the Ethics Commissioner. And I will continue to comply with those rules.
So here, there's a bit more color I want to show you about people responding to Laurie Goldstein, but here's the Hillary Clinton bit in song. She claimed during the Benghazi stuff that there was no conflict no conflict of interest. She didn't break any laws. There was no regulations. She didn't do anything technically wrong. And this is what sunk her. This is part of why people hated her, right? She said, here it is in song.
This point doesn't make everything I did was admitted. There was no law, no regulation.
Secretary Clinton should have known that an unclassified system was no place for that conversation.
I did not email any classified material to anyone on my email.
None of these emails should have been on any kind of unclassified system, not even Gmail.
Well, first of all, nothing was marked classified.
To the contrary,
Nothing was marked classified.
there is evidence of
Nothing was marked classified.
Now let me tell you what we found.
Oh my gosh.
110 emails.
So that whole song is basically Carney Clinton saying, I followed all the rules, everything that is laid out. I'm going to follow them to a T. There's no line of questioning here. Stop making up questioning. You're crazy to think there's a conflict of interest. And well, here's Michael to tell us what the conflict of interests is, because Mark Carney has been in the private sector for a long time, and so it's kind of well known what part of his compensation package is. This is what it looks like, and him being the prime minister puts him in a power situation to help his company with not much oversight, and nobody would be able to stop him, much like Justin Trudeau and how he destroyed Canada for the last 10 years. You know what I'm saying? So here's Michael, and he says, one of Mark Carney's conflicts. This is just one, right? Mind you. And there are many more possible, and we don't know because Mark Carney's being very, very itchy about it. 1. Between November 2022 and February 24, Mr. Carney was issued deferred share units and common stock options of Brookfield Assets Management with a current value of $9.7 million US. That's in the acronym will be BAM, B-A-M. As of January 16th, 25, he ceased to be a reporting insider and had not sold any DSUs or exercised any options up to that date. So we know that he hasn't sold any of those assets that he's had from Brookfield. If Mr. Carney placed these in his blind trust and retains beneficial ownership, each dollar price gain on BAM stocks gives him a profit of $500,000 US dollar. Each dollar decline yields a similar loss. Brookfield's balance sheet is under stress due to falling values, higher vacancies, and higher financing costs for commercial properties, particularly office towers. Brookfield has tried to relieve the stress through circular deals and accounting tricks. It avoids paying tax by cycling assets and cash through hundreds of different entities in several offshore tax havens. Brookfield has pitched the CPP Investment Board and other government-adjacent pension funds to invest billions in BAM. We don't know if they have had any success. This is, I believe, referencing as well a $10 billion ask from Carney to the Canadian government when Trudeau was Prime Minister. And I think that was declined. I think that said no, but I actually don't know the status of that, so I could be wrong about that. But he did ask the Canadian government to invest in Brookfield, so that's interesting. As an advisor to the then Prime Minister Trudeau. 7, as PM, Carney has the power to appoint, direct, and remove the finance minister, who has the power to appoint and remove the CPPIB board members, which translates to Mr. Carney appointing and removing CPP board members. Conflict: will Mr. Carney, through the finance minister, appoint CPP board members who will give money to BAM over those who won't? With the knowledge of Mr. Carney's financial interest and Mr. Carney's power to appoint and remove board members, exert an influence over CPPIB decisions, even without direction. If Brookfield is in financial distress, will Mr. Carney direct the Minister of Finance to bail it out with taxpayer funds? And I don't see how, they've moved to the United States, right? So that would be interesting to watch. Will knowledge of Mr. Carney's interests influence other government bodies to assist BAM, such as ECD, BDC, CMHC, etc. Will Mr. Carney's knowledge that he most likely retains a $9 million unrealized capital gain in his blind trust influence capital gains taxation rates and policies? The inclusion rate from 50% to 66% in the last budget has not yet implemented could cost him over $500,000. He has promised not to implement the change. Is that a conflict, or is that good policy, or is that both? If that's a conflict, how does he recuse himself and have that decision made? He's the Prime Minister. We don't know what other conflicts Mr. Carney may have, because the condescending little prick stonewalls and does the minimum disclosure. He seems offended that anyone even asks. And so that back to Laurie Goldstein really quickly. He says, "Jeepers creepers." He got testy with Globe and Mail's Stephanie Levitz, too, before accusing Rosemary Barton of ill will and telling her to look inside yourself on the same issue. Pierre Poilievre is testy with the media, too, but let's not pretend Mark Carney doesn't have a very short fuse. So it'll be interesting. It's like the end of Primal Fear, when they have, what's his name? Edward Norton's character, who's got 2 characters in Primal Fear, spoiler alert. And the meek one is on the stand and he's got a stutter and stuff. And the whole strategy of the lawyers to bring out the other identity and Roy, and like have Roy become violent, right? So I'll be interested to see if the Canadian press try and do this with Mark Carney. Like, you wouldn't like me when I'm angry, right? Like, and then they make him angry and then he hulks out. And then the Canadian public can see how short of a fuse he's got, right? And then everybody would be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked all that much. It would just be interesting to see, because it wouldn't play well. Although they'd bury it. Nobody would see it, right? Like, you'd see it for a day and then it would disappear into the ether. Nobody'd be allowed to talk about that again. Mark Carney would dismiss it, or he'd get angry again if you brought it up. Here's Roman Baber. He says, Robert Fife says, who is the trustee to Carney's blind trust? Like, is it his brother? Is it a family member? Who could it be? And did Mr. Carney divest himself of holdings that may put him in conflict with the PMO? Instead of providing answers, Carney gets angry at journalists. What is Carney hiding? Well, conflict of interest, man. Like, wait till Brookfield's bankrolled by the taxpayer. That's what he's waiting for, right? In an above board shell game that the taxpayer will spend years trying to unravel and understand, of course. Right? Sheldon says, so why did Carney move Brookfield to the United States instead of Europe? Right? Interesting, because they want to move to Europe, and there's all sorts of talk of moving to Europe, and Brookfield moved to the United States. It's an interesting little point. The food professor says, let's see now. Prime Minister Carney hasn't had a great first trip so far. He called Canada a quasi-European country. He says it's the most European country outside of Europe. So, and of course, Mr. Carney identifies as European, so I mean, he would know, I guess. He had a meltdown at a press conference and burned nearly 8,000 gallons of jet fuel as a net zero champion. Not a great start. So, yeah, that's interesting to watch. I don't think the Prime Minister I don't think it's going the way he expected it to go. I don't. We'll see. Gov.exe is corrupt. Mark Carney has been prime minister for 72 hours and has flown to Europe to deliver a speech. His first words were to stand with Ukraine, declare a crisis, and say Canada is the most European country outside of Europe. So much for Team Canada. Elbows up. So ridiculous. Here he is with King Charles, right? And he says, many thanks to His Majesty King Charles III for his warm welcome and gracious hospitality today. Canada is fortunate to have a steadfast defender in our sovereign. Didn't Charles have cancer treatments and was going to suspend all public everything and flew away from Westminster in a helicopter, and everybody was kind of worried? And then Kate disappeared for a while, but then she's back again, so everybody's not worried about that anymore. A whole bunch of drama, and like now nothing's happened. Everything's fine, right? Oh, Mark Carney's hanging out with King Charles, and that seems totally normal. Taking a tour of Notre Dame, right? And he says the history here at Notre Dame Cathedral reminds us that rebuilding for a stronger, better future is always possible. I was grateful to have been welcomed for a visit in Paris this morning. And Roy Greenshow says, your post of you at Notre Dame Cathedral, Mark Carney, is an unpalatable reminder of Justin Trudeau's foreign sojourns and vacuous drivel, suggesting to all engaged with the Roy Greenshow X account, we begin use of the acronym JLJ, just like Justin, where and whenever it fits. I don't know about the acronym, but I just think it's interesting that there are these similarities between Justin and Carney. Justin truly was a puppet. Like, he's doing what he's told, much like Carney's doing what he's told. Carney, I think, is a different piece, maybe, but he's occupying the same board piece as Justin Trudeau did. Bradshaw says, and I think that Justin Trudeau will pop up somewhere else. I think he's probably in the running for some NATO or United Nations position, and they're trying to figure out how to counter Trump to keep the United States money on the hook, but not Trump, right? So they're trying to figure that. They're trying to figure out how they're going to do that because Trump wants to get rid of them. So we'll see. Bradshaw says, are you kidding me? Carney invites Zelensky to the G7 summit. Are you surprised? I can't say that I'm surprised. Can't say that I'm surprised by that at all. This news, right? RTE says Canada's PM Carney invites Zelensky to G7 summit in June. Canada's Prime Minister Carney has invited the Ukrainian Prime Minister to the G7 in Alberta. G7 summit in June in Alberta. Mr. Carney, who took office last week, spoke to the Ukrainian leader over the weekend. The official said, adding President Zelensky has been invited to G7 in Alberta in June. The invitation comes amid an uncertain approach among the group of 7 powerful democracies towards the Russia-Ukraine war since President Trump returned to office. Won't it be interesting if by June there's a peace deal in place, right? Like, does this invitation change the math on the ground for peace between Donald Trump and Putin? Are talking this morning on the phone. So usually you don't have the leaders of the heads of state talk unless there's something to talk about. Are they going to have their peace signing moment, right? Everybody's coming out and signing the deal, and Nessim Dorna plays in the background, right? And then all the people get their assassinations and all the rest of it plays out all at the same time. It's like Godfather 2, where Michael's being baptized and the other Michael's being baptized, right? I think it's the other Michael. Is the kid named Michael? The child is being baptized and the Godfather, or the new Godfather, is being baptized in blood, right? Seems like the same thing. Anyway, crazy stuff. So I think that this changes it, maybe. And I think that they're trying to change it. And I think that they want an excuse to continue the Ukrainian war. I actually haven't watched this, but Canada Proud says the Mark Carney video, this video, Mark Carney and his creepy billionaire friends don't want you to see. And it's got Ghislaine Maxwell, and there's all sorts of fun stuff. It's a minute long. I feel like we can watch it together. Here we go.
Are you a billionaire worried in these tumultuous times? Well, Mark Carney is the Canadian candidate for you. Only Mark Carney understands your worries about your overseas tax shelters, or fears that a friend or loved one might show up on a Jeffrey Epstein visitor's log. Other Canadian politicians may pretend to be rich, but only Mark Carney is so rich, he can't tell us how rich he is. Only Mark Carney can be trusted to promote our business deals with the Chinese Communist Party, and only Mark Carney worked at Goldman Sachs and attends our exclusive clubs and dinners. Does Pierre Poilievre even know what type of fork to use on a private jet? Our Mark Carney has not 1, but 3 passports. Does Pierre Poilievre even have a bank account in Bermuda? Global billionaires like us can't risk someone who's not like us. The fact is, Mark Carney is the only candidate billionaires can trust. Vote like your 4th yacht depends on it. This message is brought to you by Billionaires for Carney.
Funny. I've seen better. But it was pretty good. Here is and the Mark Carney stuff kind of plays right into the election, and he's attacking Pierre Poilievre, and he does not know how to do media. He is really kind of bad with media. I don't know what he's talking about. This is another video, and the Liberals really suffer from this, where it seems like what they're saying takes a lot longer than the minute and a half we're forced to listen to them. In the middle, he starts saying Canada loses because we're stupid. It sounds like he's saying that, but he's attributing those words to Mr. Poilievre. And so you'll lose interest. Right around here, you'll lose interest. And then he says Canada loses because we're stupid here. And then he doesn't qualify that with anything. Except blaming it for Poilievre, but he doesn't explain it much. So here's Mark Carney being bad in an interview in front of the camera. Here we go.
Jobs ever had. He is being a politician. He was a political staffer. He got elected to the House of Commons very early on, his low 20s. Said he was only going to serve 2 terms. He's ended up serving, I think he's probably into his 5th. He's got the biggest pension, publicly paid pension of anyone. And he's that lifelong politician that, you can only believe so much in the free market if you're a tenured professor at Chicago or you're a lifelong politician.
This is a study on how to take a lot of experience climbing in the ranks from a young MP to becoming the leader of the party and being minister along the way in multiple governments, being reelected in the same riding for years and years and years. Now the incumbent does have an advantage, but how do you take experience and make that sound bad? Mark Carney is trying to do that to Pierre Poilievre, to taint everything that makes him a strong candidate for leader. Okay, honestly, and for leader and for prime minister too. So it's interesting to watch if you know what you're watching. But this isn't genuine or honest. He's being a snake.
Right. And he just sort of worships in that world. He defaults to the same solutions all the time. And he's also, I honestly believe he disdains much about the country, much of what I just described, which to me, and I think to Canadians, is the nature of the country. He disdains. So he's been on this mantra for the last several years. Canada's broken, and Canada's broken because we're stupid. Okay. Canada's broken because we're stupid. And he finds an echo chamber with Jordan Peterson and other people who he sits down and talks with. So there's a disdain for the country that he envisions. It's pretty awkward for him now that the country's coming together and Canadian pride, and we're under attack by the very people that he's been cozying up to. So literally as we speak, he's trying to find a Canadian flag to wrap himself in and play patriot. Last refuge of a scoundrel.
Honestly, they're delusional and twisting reality into trying to fit their narrative. There's all sorts of strange attacks against Pierre Poilievre, and I really think that when he says Canada is losing because we're stupid, even the attribution to Poilievre isn't very well done. It's clumsy because it takes too long. The whole lead up to what he's saying sounds like he's the one criticizing Canada, and when he finishes, he says Canada's losing because we're stupid. Canada's losing because we're stupid. Okay. And then he talks some more and then attributes all of that to Poilievre, but none of it is something that has directly been said by Poilievre. It would be much more effective to put up Poilievre himself if you want to accuse him of something. I do think that he has the same ideas as the Liberals, and that's weird that Mark Carney's saying he doesn't have any other ideas than us. But that's because the Liberals are stealing all of his ideas. So, right? I mean, to be honest, that's what's going on. So, I mean, it's interesting that they're stealing his ideas and saying, well, he sounds just like us. Well, yeah. But then the response to the Trump tariffs, terrible, absolutely terrible. And it's the same and worse with Poilievre. I think Poilievre would be worse, actually. So weird, but they're all globalists, which is unfortunate. So I don't think the solution to our problems is electing the Conservative Party, unfortunately. Marco says, the Trudeau-Carney Liberals have delivered homelessness, food lines, hunger, rising crime, overdoses, tent cities, inflation, plummeting productivity, capital flight, financial incompetence, economic dependency, excessive taxation, nepotism, abuse of power, insecure borders, corruption, a shut down parliament, and a market chaos. and market chaos, all while being led for over a decade by an inexperienced part-time snowboarding sloganeer. Their greatest hits include Team Canada, Elbows Up, Got Your Back, Canada is Back, Delivering for Canadians, Diversity is Our Strength, Sunny Ways, Working Hard for the Middle Class and Those Who Struggle to Join It. We're all in this together, but somehow they think slapping Carney on the label will make everyone forget. So this is a Liberal Party campaign ad, and it's got experience versus incompetence. So Mark Carney's got experience. Apparently Poilievre is incompetent. Plan versus a slogan, which isn't true because they sloganize all, like the Liberals sloganize all the time. And calm versus chaos. Calm? Carney was ready to rip Stephanie's head off. And Rosemary Barton, look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, I think I might hold on to that and use that just because I think it's very demeaning. Honestly. Russell Brand says, Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, seems to have connections with Ghislaine Maxwell, a notorious child sex trafficker. Do you think it's possible to have met with people like Ghislaine Maxwell or Epstein without getting entangled in their mess? Oh, hello, Mr. Epstein. No, that's not something I'm interested in. Thanks for asking. Weird, right? Like, can you just exist in those worlds and not notice anything strange? Like, oh, we're not going to hang out with them anymore, right? Maybe. I don't know. I have never experienced it. Thank goodness. We'll knock some wood on that one. Gender Dissent says, heads up. Mark Carney has a gender-deranged adult child. Sasha, formerly Sophia, goes by they, them. No way Carney is going to help this country get back on track when it comes to sex and gender. Now you know a vote for Liberal Party in our next federal election means more brainwashed and mutilated children and the complete eradication of women's sex-based rights and protections against deranged and evil men. He will finish what Justin started. Don't let him do it. In a Facebook post from March 2020, Sasha said, I'm a mentally ill international student. So there you go. Sasha Carney. Very, very interesting what's going on there. And Bob says, in a Facebook post, I'm a mentally ill international student. Sasha also wants to ban all prisons. Think about that for a moment. Carney's 24-year-old adult daughter wants to let Paul Bernardo, a serial rapist and serial killer dubbed the Scarborough Rapist, the schoolgirl killer, including a dangerous offender designation, out of prison. So weird. Very, very concerning. And I don't think Mark Carney would have won a general election. I don't think he would have become prime minister had we had one. But we'll see. Do you think, even in our rigged system, do you think Carney will win? Do you think Poilievre will win? Jagmeet Singh says, to Poilievre's friends, lay off Carney's kid. Stop being a bunch of bullies and jerks. It's not okay. John Paul Berg says, the pseudo-moralistic virtue signaling and faux empathy from ideological, subverted fake politicians is not okay. This ideology is mutilating and indoctrinating our children into a fallacious and profoundly detrimental worldview. It's fake. Okay, fake worldview. And it's harmful, detrimental worldview. You are evil. Yeah, I think that's true, right? If you cut off your sex organs, you don't change the sex that you are. Remember Varys from Game of Thrones? He didn't become a woman, okay? He was just a eunuch. And if you cut off your own sex organs, I'm sorry, but that's just what happens to you too, right? Like things happen that you can't undo. And that's a real big problem, right? People go to great lengths to protect themselves from having things happen like that. It's like cutting off your leg. You can't just put one back on comfortably, right? Like you can't just sew on a flesh and blood leg. You can put on a prosthetic, but that comes with its own complications, right? And it's not ideal. If you can keep your leg, right? And same thing with your sex organs. If you can keep your sex organs and come to terms with who you are as a person, then that'll be better than cutting off your sex organs and realizing that doesn't fix your problem. Shazzy says, BC real estate. Let's talk about money. This is still in the Mark Carney kind of realm of things. BC real estate, fake mortgage broker raked in $6 million, 23 agents charged, and $500 million in shady loans exposed, 875 fraudulent mortgage files processed over a decade, $500 million in mortgages arranged through fake documents, $6 million in fees pocketed by unregistered broker Jay Kanth Chowdhury. 23 real estate professionals charged, 15. So these guys knew, right? The 23 real estate professionals knew they were getting fake mortgages. 15 cases concluded. Agents faked income and savings to secure fraudulent mortgages. Suspensions, fines of up to $130,000, and lifetime bans issued. Investigations still ongoing. More sanctions expected. Nobody's in jail? Really? I mean, like, hasn't that done a number on our economy? Really? It's crazy. Nearly 24 BC real estate professionals face sanctions for working with fake mortgage broker. Wild and crazy times. But again, nobody seems to care. This is a guy from the UK, and he's talking about what's going on with BlackRock and buying up assets on the cheap. So when the crash happens, your house will get bought up by a conglomerate, and then you'll be able to rent it back from them. But now they reconcile through government subsidy. So like, they'll charge you twice or 3 times what you pay, but the government will pay to help you offset that cost for a little bit, right? Anyway, here's this guy talking about how it's working in the UK. And like COVID, they try different scenarios in different places, and they use what works in one place in other places to make it go global or whatever. Here's this UK guy.
BlackRock, right, have just bought £1.4 billion worth of UK homes. Lloyds Bank want to build a portfolio of 50,000 homes by 2030. That's public information. What we're seeing right now is massive institutions buying up all of our homes across the UK, right? We're not going to live in a society where you can own your own home. You will just rent. We'll become a society of renters. And that will probably happen over the next 15, 20 years. This is probably one of the last buying cycles you can have. And what's sad about that is that if you are, 85-year-old Paul, right, and you can't afford your rent this month, normally you call up your landlord. And despite what people say and media says, like, most landlords are good, humane people, you come to some sort of agreement, right? But you can't call up a massive US private equity firm based in New York, right? And to them, you're just a line item, right? It's going to be really, really bad. And it's going to be much harder for us and much harder for society as a whole. But what's happening right now is that all of our homes in the UK are being bought up by multinationals.
Yeah, and they're going to harvest them, and then they're going to recoup that cost, because all of that becomes monthly revenue, right? Like, you rent everything, right? You rent access to the heater in your car, you rent access to everything, internet, all of it's rented, monthly cost. Here is Mini, and it says, here's a thread by Tiffany. The next 2008 is happening now. I'm going to go to the thread reader app, because it's sometimes Twitter loses the next tweet. So Party City, Jones, Forever 21, Big Lots, these are all brands in the United States. This isn't just retail struggling, this is financial arson. Private equity rigged the system. They built a time bomb, and now it's detonating. Here's a thread. The bombshell. What if I told you Jones, or Joanne's? Jones. I thought it was like Joan with a long N, but Joanne? Yeah, Joanne, that's probably better. Joanne's has 97% of its stores profitable. Hooters was making money. I can't believe Hooters went bankrupt, right? Because I heard Hooters went bankrupt, and I thought, that's crazy town. People stopped going to Hooters. Get out of town, right? Party City, cash positive stores, right? And yet they're all going bankrupt. Why? Because private equity is using a weaponized version of the 2008 playbook. Let me explain. The 2008 parallel. In 2008, Wall Street used adjustable rate mortgages to sink the economy. They'd hid toxic debt inside financial products called CDOs, collateralized debt obligations. When rates adjusted, people defaulted, markets crashed, and pensions tanked. The same disaster is happening again, but this time it's hidden inside private equity. Introducing back-floating rate debt. They don't call them adjustable rate loans anymore. Now they call them back-floating rate debt. Same predatory scam, new name, but way worse. This time, they've stacked it on top of business instead of homeowners. And when rates rise, the business collapses instead of the bank. Joann's, a cautionary tale. Joann's was not failing. 97% of their stores were profitable. Sales were strong. Their customer base was loyal. So why did they collapse overnight? Because private equity loaded them with back-floating rate debt, then let them die. The adjustable rate nightmare. Joann's didn't take on $1 billion in debt. PE firms did. private equity firms did. And instead of paying it themselves, they forced Joanne's to carry the loan. At 3% interest, the debt was manageable. At 7.5%, it became a death sentence. Interest payments tripled, the company collapsed, and PE firms walked away rich. CLO, the new CDOs, where did all that toxic debt go? They bundled it, they packaged it into new financial products called CLOs, collateralized loan obligations. Sound familiar? It should. This is exactly what they did in 2008 with CDOs, except this time they sold it to pensions. How this threatens your retirement? Your 401k, your pension fund, your city's retirement plan, they own CLOs because Wall Street sold them as safe investments. But just like in 2008, when the defaults start rolling in, it won't be the rich that suffer, it'll be you. Private equity owns everything. Think this is just a retail problem. Private equity controls up to 25% of essential industries, healthcare, real estate, food supply, shipping, and logistics. And they've stacked all of it with back-floating rate debt. One domino falls, they all go down. Trump wants to close the loophole that makes this possible. The entire scam relies on a rigged tax code, the carried interest loophole. PE firms get taxed less than teachers and firefighters. Trump says he'll close this loophole. If he does, it would cut the legs out from under private equity's looting spree. So they say, tell Donald Trump to do this and make sure he does it, blah, 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 blah. I don't know, but it seems like very plausible that they could be doing this and could trigger some kind of downfall, especially since very profitable stores like Hooters, and I don't know Joanne's, but I would imagine that's similar to JCPenney, right? And there were other examples as well. GameStop was being shorted. No, is the GameStop thing analogous, or maybe not? But basically, they're trying to download making the companies hold the bag when it's the equity firms that are taking the risk and getting the reward if the reward pays off. Elon Musk is talking about debt and cleaning up the Social Security rolls. He says for the past 2 weeks, Social Security has begun a major cleanup of their records. Approximately 3.2 million number holders, all listed age 120 plus, have now been marked as deceased. More work still to be done. So that's interesting that it's taken this much time to remove all of the dead people who are on Social Security rolls. That's, very, very concerning. Here's Elon Musk talking about magic money computers. I think these things exist in Canada too, really. Here's Elon Musk.
Magic money computers at the Treasury.
Well,
so tell us about it, because I never heard of that until you brought that up.
Okay, so you may think that that the government computers all talk to each other, they synchronize, they add up what funds are going somewhere, and it's it's coherent. That the numbers, for example, that you're presented as a senator, are actually the real numbers.
One would think.
One would think. They're not.
Yeah.
Okay. They're not totally wrong, but they're probably off by 5% or 10% in some cases. So I call a magic money computer any computer which can just make money out of thin air. That's magic money.
So how does that work?
It just issues payments.
And you said there's something like 11 of these computers at Treasury that are sending out trillions in payments?
They're mostly at Treasury. Some are, but there's some at HHS, there's one or two at State. There's some at DOD. I think we found now 14 magic money computers.
14, okay.
They just send money out of nothing.
I think those things exist in Canada too. Honestly, it must. It's insane. And Elon Musk continues talking about Act Blue, how it's the biggest scam and next level. I forgot that I have to turn off the stream. So everybody watching on the stream, thanks for watching, everybody. And we're going to head over to the paid show now. So we'll catch you tomorrow. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful